he talks about how he was over, I don't know how many Satanists, call them churches. He was like the bishop.
You gotta be kidding me.
What was in her heart? You don't know what sin she'd committed. You don't know how much unbelief was there. You don't know whether she hated her husband.
I don't think so.
Why would anybody spend so much time ranting and raving about something that they don't believe in?
Really?
Welcome to Skeptics Brew Pub with Brother Brewer. And welcome to episode 18 of Skeptics Brew Pub. I'm your host, Brother Brewer, and tonight I am joined by Zach from the Zachrilege Cast. How you doing tonight, Zach?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for being here. Now, I was on on your show a couple of weeks ago, and we had a pretty nice little conversation about the show and about beer, so I thought maybe we could continue that a little bit tonight and maybe just kind of touch base again and see what's been going on since then. Just right off the bat, one question I've got for you is, what got you started into podcasting?
Well, a lot of people were doing podcasts, and I started listening to, I'm trying to think, I think it was the Atheist Experience. It was my first show I listened to, and I just kind of spread out into various shows. And I went to a local kind of freethinkers group, and one of the guys there mentioned the Barroom Atheists. So I started listening to that show, and they said they need guest bartenders, and I appeared on that show, and it was like November of 2014, I think. And I did it, and I thought, well, this isn't so bad, so why don't I do it myself? And thanks to Bobby Carey from No Religion Required, he helped me out with the technical aspects, and I had a microphone. And thanks to Google Hangouts, rest in peace, I was able to start doing the show. Initially, I had the idea of just talking about podcasts I listened to and telling people about them, but then I was talking to Bobby, and he's like, hey, why don't you just interview me? So it became an interview show, and now this week I'll be doing episode 69, and I try to keep it simple. I think other people, do skits or do different stuff, and I'm just like, I'm going to do interviews, I'm going to talk to people. They're going to be interesting. Hopefully I'm interesting enough for you to keep listening to them, and that's really the whole point of the Zachrilege Cast, other than being hard to spell.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I actually, Bobby C. kind of helped me out with my start too, as far as giving me advice on what kind of stuff that I needed and what I didn't need to get this off the ground. So yeah, he and Miss Ashley, they're good people.
And I was at their place last weekend, so.
Oh, I'm jealous.
There you go, watching my alma mater, Missouri, lose to their Georgia Bulldogs, and I gave Ashley a bottle of Moscato wine, which is like the sweet tea of wine, I think. Mm-hmm. And she was passed out by the end of the game. But Bobby was there, and he gave me the 1.5 birds. And Ashley called me ass in person, so I feel like I'm now the ass of the atheist movement. So
nice.
That's going to be my tagline from now on.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not close enough to you guys to be able to do that, because you're coming out of Georgia, I think, which is a bit further south than I am.
Yeah, I'm in Atlanta, and they're in Savannah, so I just happened to be there for the weekend, and it's about a 3.5-hour drive, and so they're like, come on over. And I got to hang out with them and their cats and eat some wings and drink some beer and watch some football.
Now, how hard was it for you to start getting guests, though? Because I know sometimes I have to sit and think about who to interview whenever I'm doing my own show. So how do you decide who you're going to do from week to week? Do you have a plan, or is it just kind of, hey, do you want to come on, or what do you do?
I like that. Do you have a plan? Not necessarily. Initially, I think it just was the shows I listened to, and I listened to so many that it took a while to get through everybody. And after a while, you're like, well, who else can I talk to? Well, if you listen to podcasts, most of them do interviews because it's pretty straightforward, and you just find people through there, and occasionally you stumble upon a guest that maybe hasn't been on another podcast, which is fun, and then you get the people who've been on 20, 30 of them, and they're pros and know what they're doing. And that's, I guess, it's the occasional problem for me is that's the show. I've done solo ones before, but I just don't think it offers the same amount of interest, so I kind of stopped doing that. And I'm like, all right, I can get a guest. If I don't get a guest, then I'm probably not doing a show that week. that's probably why I haven't done a show in about 3 weeks, but I have got a couple of guests lined up, so I'm set up hopefully through October. I'm not as set up as Mr. Brewer here, who was like, "Hey, you want to be on my show in like September?" And I'm like, "You want to be on my show next week?" That's kind of that'll compare how much planning. I kind of wish I had a booker in a way, but I mean, really, probably should be a little more organized and just every time there's a name I find interesting, just write it down, because I haven't really had people say no. There are the occasional just not responders, but for the most part, this is still a fairly small community, and I think everybody is looking to help people, which is great, and they're also just wanting to get their voice out there, and there's some people just like to talk. And about this subject, this isn't something I get to talk about very much, except doing my show every week. So I'm like, if I want to talk about atheism, I got to get a guest.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed that here in my area too. I've gotten involved with some of the free thought groups here. I'm actually part of the NWA Humanist group here now. But I've noticed that outside of that, especially in the place that I work, you really can't talk about it a whole lot. There's not really, we're kind of a small group here in the South, especially. Though we are getting bigger, it seems.
Well, I mean, it's almost like another interest I have is like fantasy football, and unless you're at a certain level of interest, it's going to be the most boring conversation ever. And I know a lot of people have personal stake in religion, but when it comes to just talking about atheism, I'm sure most people's eyes will glaze over quickly after knowing that you worship the devil.
Oh, yeah. And eat babies and all that good stuff.
Did you hear what they said on the Atheist this week or something? Like, what's that? Or podcasts,
What the hell's a podcast?
So it's usually conversations for a smaller group when you find the really interesting people talking about it, and then that's the best part.
Yeah. Now you said you've got a couple of interesting guests lined up down the pipe. Who are you planning on bringing on here in the next couple weeks?
Well, I have Andrew Torres, who was a guest on Atheistically Speaking, and then Thomas Smith was like, "Hey, let's just start a new show." So it's called Opening Arguments, and it's really like a legal show. I don't even know if it's specifically an atheist show, but anyway, he's a lawyer out of Baltimore. So, it's a relatively new show. I think they're about 12 episodes in, and it was one of those, "Hey, we're friends on Facebook, so why not ask you for an interview?" I just had to get a list of people, and he was one who said yes. Here's the problem with running your own shop and doing your own show and doing everything. I didn't actually see a message that I got on my Facebook page, and it was actually a British author who's like, "Hey, I heard you had a British author on the show. How about me and my book?" And so he's going to be up in a while. And I've reached out to John Hamill, who I actually hadn't heard of before, but he's part of the Atheist Ireland National Committee, and he's part of Atheist Alliance International. And I'm like, hey, I've only done one international interview, and that would be fun. I just got to figure out the timing for it. I'm trying to remember when I interviewed the author from England, if he had to do it in the middle of the night, or I think I scheduled it in the middle of the afternoon. Occasionally, flexibility and timing is your best weapon as an interviewer.
That's definitely true. You also a little while back, I think you had you had a preacher on at one point, I think, that you interviewed. How did that go?
Well, it was a friend of mine, because I live in two worlds. Like, I live in this fantasy football world, and I've done a bunch of interviews on that side. And I just remember this guy I knew. I was like, he said he was a pastor, and he was like, kind of did it part-time because he didn't make a full-time living doing it, so he had to do other work. And I was like, well, there's a perfect guest for me. So I had him on a while back, and I think it went pretty well. It wasn't like a David Smalley dogma debate episode where we were kind of arguing with each other. It was more like I was just intrigued by what was the life like being kind of a pastor in a relatively small town and having that kind of upbringing and just a difference in viewpoint, and see where we come together other than love of a sport.
Oh, okay.
I think we'll have him, as in multiple people. I'll probably try to have him back at another time, because it was interesting to ask him, had you read the Bible? And he said he hadn't read the whole thing, because some of the Old Testament was a little bit choppy. Like,
yeah,
this is your foundational document. You should be all over it. But I understand why some people would have trouble getting through it, because I haven't tried.
Yeah, there's some parts in there that are really tough to get through. Take it from somebody that's read it twice now. It's like trying to get through numbers. Oh my goodness, it's except for a few stories sprinkled in here and there. It's like, well, at this time there were this many Israelites and this many cattle and this many sheep. And it's holy mackerel. It's a tough read sometimes. Now, as far as your own your atheism, now. Did you start off in a fundamentalist kind of situation beforehand? Were you always an atheist? What kind of led you into that?
I don't know if I agree with the people that say that you're born an atheist, because I still think you have to see the God concept and go, do I agree or do I not? In my family, we didn't grow up religious at all. We never really went to church, didn't really talk about it very much, and oddly enough, my parents have kind of gone back to their faith, so they're kind of in a Catholic church now. My parents were two different kinds of Catholic, which was actually a big deal when they were dating, and now I guess it's not, so they're in kind of a liberal Catholic church, but no, it never was a thing for me. I didn't really think about it, and oddly enough, I was listening to the Adam Carolla show, and he made some kind of rant about religion and being against it, and I was like, yeah, that's me. So I was like, oh, why don't I look up some podcasts? And thus began the journey, the dark journey, dark path.
Yes, to the dark side, where we have plenty of beer. Now,
of course.
Now, on the beers, of course, you've now got me just about every episode. I will announce what beer I'm drinking and have a toast to you, just because you've said I don't have enough beer in my shows. Now, what are your favorite kind of beers? Let's kind of jump over to that for a little bit. What kind of? I know you said any beer's a good beer, but what are some of your favorites as far as styles?
Well, let's not go too far. When I'm tailgating for a football game, it's all the LITs, and I'm like, come on, people, there are craft beers that you talk about craft microbrews type beers. Everybody thinks of these weird ingredients, and I'm like, they have session beers that are like 4% that you can drink as much as you can drink your Miller Lite, and you'll actually enjoy the taste of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's every kind of beer out there. It's tough because beer is another subject where most people our eyes will glaze over because there's just so many styles. And yesterday, at the end of my football viewing, I pulled out a beer from the brewery called Tart of Darkness.
Ooh.
And that's a sour stout.
Oh, that's something I hadn't heard before.
In a brewery in California that has a weird name. They spell it differently. But I popped that one open, and it was I think it may have topped what I thought was my favorite beer of the year. So it's like Sour Patch Kids, but alcoholic almost. It's like the sour kind of hits you hard, but I like the darker sours. I didn't realize this kind of style existed, but now I'm like all over these brown sour ales, because I'm a big fan of like brown ales, things that are like a little bit sweeter, not as bitter, or at least balanced, are my styles. Like I was drinking Smutty Nose Old Brown Dog Ale, so anything that's like a brown ale, I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah,
like I'd say Newcastle was my beer that brought me into kind of, and now I can only drink it if it's like on tap, because these are the snobby beer things, like they're in a clear bottle, so it affects the flavor, that kind of stuff. And and it's like, just get it on tap. But no, I was at one of the best brew places in town called the Brick Store, and they have like cellared beers, like a flight of beers that have been aged for a while, and that was really fun to enjoy. So yeah, I had a bunch of different types of beer this weekend, but I enjoy, like, I actually brought 2 beers out forgetting that we're not doing video, and like I have, on my bargain beer side, I have the Sierra Nevada Oktoberfest, which is like $12 for a 12-pack, so it's, fairly affordable for most people. And then I have a Rodenbach Alexander, which is like a sour cherry beer that, the bomber's like, I don't know, $15, but it's really good, and it was a really limited beer, and I'm like waiting for a special occasion to have it. Sometimes the special occasion is it's the day ending in Y, but
yeah, that's true.
Some other beers are ones you're going to have every once in a while.
Yeah, there's a few like that. Like I'm still bugging Summit Brewery about bringing back the number 19 Make It So beer that they had out last summer. That one was just amazing. It was an ESB, which means, if I remember right, that's an English special bitter that included Earl Grey tea in the brew process, and so it had just that little bit of the tea flavor along with the the English sweet beer flavor to it.